Imagine this. You wake up one morning in the perfect life you once swore would complete you. The sun pours through expensive curtains, the sheets smell like lavender, and there's a glass of fresh squeezed juice waiting on the counter. Your phone vibrates with notifications, likes, messages, admiration, and every voice seems to confirm that you've made it. The car in the driveway gleams. The career title sounds powerful when spoken aloud. The body in the mirror is toned, sculpted, enviable. And yet, beneath it all, there's a hollow ache you can't name. A knowing disquiet. A voice that whispers, "Is this it?" You feel an eerie betrayal. Everything you've been chasing, the indulgences, the pleasures, the symbols of victory, was supposed to silence that ache. Instead, they have sharpened it. You got what you wanted, and somehow it left you emptier than before. Why does pleasure, the very thing we crave most, so often dissolve into misery once we possess it? Why does the satisfaction fade the moment it is within our grasp? The paradox deepens when you consider how relentlessly the world insists otherwise. Advertisements promise happiness in a bottle, a vacation, a pill. Cultures build entire economies on the pursuit of comfort, status, and thrill. Friends nod approvingly when you announce your next indulgence. Treat yourself, they say. You deserve it. But have you noticed? The very phrase suggests a hidden punishment that without these treats, life itself feels like deprivation. And so you lunge forward again and again. The next drink, the next lover, the next raise, the next dopamine hit. You chase like a starving animal who never dares pause, because pausing reveals the hunger hasn't been satisfied at all. Imagine standing in a crowded street where every billboard screams more. More beauty, more youth, more luxury, more connection, more freedom. Yet as you glance around, the crowd doesn't look liberated, they look exhausted. Smiles stretched thin, eyes darting, hearts restless. Each person seems to carry an invisible leash tied to the promise of just one more. Is it possible that the very pursuit of pleasure, the promise of relief, is itself the cage? The ancients suspected this trap long before neuroscience gave it a name. Epicurus, often misunderstood as a prophet of indulgence, actually warned against overindulgence, insisting that pleasure's sweetness curdles when it becomes a god. Buddhists named it tanha craving, the root of suffering. And yet, despite millennia of warnings, the modern world has perfected the art of craving. Your attention is monetized, your desires are engineered, your sense of enough is systematically erased. But here's the haunting question. Even if you strip away the advertisements, the algorithms, the capitalist machinery, does the problem really vanish? Or is it something deeper? Suddenly, you're scrambling for the next crescendo, the next intoxication. Why is joy so fragile? Why does every peak already contain the seed of its own collapse? Here lies the unsettling paradox. You chase pleasure not because it satisfies, but because it fails to. The brief taste seduces you into believing the next taste will be fuller, richer, more permanent. Forever receding, forever ensuring that real peace never arrives? This isn't a question you can casually dismiss. Because if it's true, then nearly everything you've been taught about how to live, how to succeed, how to love is upside down. And so you stand at the threshold of a dangerous realization that your misery might not be an accident of fate, but the logical conclusion of chasing what you were told would save you. The question hangs in the air, sharper now, almost unbearable. If pleasure enslaves rather than frees, what force is it that governs your life, and what truth lies buried beneath it? To uncover this, we must peel back the surface and plunge into the roots into psychology, philosophy, and the dark architecture of the human mind, where this paradox was planted long before you were born. Imagine peeling back the skin of your own desires, not literally, but inwardly. Imagine tracing each craving, each hunger, each restless impulse down to its root. What you find there is not pleasure itself, but something far more unsettling, a void, an emptiness that no indulgence seems able to touch. You have felt it before. The hollow space that grows louder in the quiet hours, when there's no music, no distractions, no applause. That space, that nameless lack, is what makes the promise of pleasure so intoxicating. For a moment, it seems to fill the void. But like pouring water into a cracked vessel, the relief seeps away, and the emptiness returns, sometimes even deeper than before. The psychology of an endless hunger. Modern psychology has a name for this treadmill, the hedonic adaptation. Dopamine, the chemical so often misunderstood as pleasure itself, does not deliver contentment, it delivers pursuit. It is the spark that keeps you reaching, not the glow that lets you rest. Nature, in its ruthless logic, designed you not to be content, but to keep moving, keep chasing, keep surviving. So what happens when survival is no longer in question? When the predators are gone, the shelter is built, and the food is abundant. The brain, blind to your existential security, still whispers, not enough, not yet, more. And in obeying that whisper, you become enslaved by it. The philosophical depth of desire. This isn't a modern discovery. Schopenhauer called desire a pendulum, swinging between pain and boredom. Pain when you lack what you crave, boredom when you finally have it. Nietzsche, too, recognized this restlessness, but tried to transmute it into something higher, the will to power, the drive not merely to possess, but to overcome, to create, to transcend. And then there was Sartre, who declared that human beings are a useless passion. Why useless? Because we are forever reaching for a completeness we cannot achieve, trying to make ourselves into gods, yet trapped in the finitude of flesh. Every desire exposes our incompleteness. Every satisfaction only reveals the next horizon. In this sense, the pursuit of pleasure is not merely a psychological quirk, it is a philosophical condition. To be human is to desire, and to desire is to suffer. Pleasure, in its very structure, cannot free you, because its existence depends on your lack. The shadow in the room, Jung's insight. Carl Jung would have said that the problem is not pleasure itself, but our refusal to confront what lurks beneath it. Pleasure becomes a mask, a shiny, colorful distraction from the shadow we fear. When you chase indulgence, you aren't only seeking delight, you are fleeing despair. You are running from the encounter with your own nothingness, your mortality, your wounds. The more you refuse to face that shadow, the more power it gains. Like a predator you never name, it grows sharper in the dark. You stuff the emptiness with food, sex, entertainment, achievement. And for a while, the beast hides. But then comes the silence, the night, the moment when the distraction ends and the shadow returns whispering, "You cannot escape me forever." Pleasure, in this sense, is not your salvation. It is your drug. And like all drugs, its relief diminishes, its price rises, and its withdrawal becomes unbearable. Society is the great pusher. Yet this is not just an individual struggle, it is a cultural one. If you were born into a society that told you pleasure was dangerous, you might resist it. But you were born into one that tells you it is salvation. From the first advertisement you ever saw, from the first peer who admired your possessions, you were programmed. Huxley warned of this in Brave New World, where pleasure itself through drugs, entertainment, and engineered desires became the ultimate method of control. Not chains, not whips, but delight. A population too busy chasing dopamine is too busy to revolt. Think about it. Entire economies depend on your dissatisfaction. If you were truly content, how many industries would collapse overnight? Luxury fashion, fast food, pornography, consumer electronics, tourism, even social media. They thrive on your inability to rest in enough. Your emptiness is their fuel, the identity trap. The cruelest trick is how the pursuit of pleasure entwines itself with identity. You don't just chase experiences, you build yourself out of them. I am the kind of person who travels. I am the kind of person who drives this car. I am the kind of person who lives for adventure, who eats at the finest restaurants, who collects lovers, who earns 6 figures. But if your identity rests on pleasures, what happens when they fade? When beauty declines? When wealth vanishes? When the party ends? If who you are is built on what you consume, then losing it means losing yourself. No wonder the emptiness feels like death. It is death. The death of the self you believed was real. The hidden problem revealed. And so here we arrive at the hidden problem. It is not merely that pleasure fades, or that society manipulates you, or that biology drives you toward endless pursuit. The deeper issue is this. You have confused pleasure with meaning. You have been taught that the fleeting rush of satisfaction is the same as fulfillment, that a full stomach is the same as a full soul, that a peak of ecstasy is the same as a life of purpose. But they are not the same. They were never the same. Pleasure is a spark. Meaning is a flame. Pleasure is a thrill. Meaning is a foundation. Pleasure excites you for a moment. Meaning carries you through despair. And yet, in chasing the spark, you overlook the fire. You reach for substitutes, not realizing that each indulgence drives you further from the thing you truly seek. The haunting paradox deepens. If pleasure cannot satisfy, and if meaning lies elsewhere, then every time you chase the first, you delay the second. You tighten the leash around your own neck. But what does this leash do to you day after day, year after year? What does it cost not just your mind, but your society, your relationships, your very humanity? That is the next truth we must confront. For the consequences of this hidden problem are not abstract. They are everywhere, silently corroding the world you live in. Imagine standing at a party, glass in hand, surrounded by laughter and music. Everyone seems alive, intoxicated, radiant. Yet if you look closely, really closely, you see something else. Behind the forced smiles, behind the glittering lights, there's an edge of desperation. The conversations feel rehearsed, the laughter a little too loud, the joy slightly strained. It's as though everyone has silently agreed to perform happiness, terrified of being the one who admits, I am not fulfilled. This is one of the unseen consequences of the pursuit of pleasure. It does not simply fail to satisfy. It creates a world where dissatisfaction must be hidden, denied, masked by more consumption. The cycle grows invisible because everyone participates in it. The tyranny of comparison. One of the cruelest consequences lies in how pleasure mutates into comparison. You don't just want to feel good, you want to feel better than others. The car must not only be fast, but faster. The body must not only be fit, but fitter. Social media has sharpened this instinct into a knife. Every scroll becomes a mirror, reflecting not your joy, but your inadequacy. Neuroscience tells us that the brain is wired for relative reward. The same paycheck that feels abundant when your friends earn less feels paltry when they earn more. And so you are never measuring your life by its own worth, but by the shadows cast by others. Pleasure becomes competitive. Envy seeps in. The pursuit of joy turns into a battlefield where you can never truly win. The addiction cycle, worse still, the brain adapts. That is the essence of addiction, not just to substances, but to anything that triggers dopamine. A like on a post, a piece of chocolate, a sexual conquest, a shopping spree. The first time brings ecstasy, the 10th time, numbness. So you escalate. You drink more, buy more, consume more, post more. But the emptiness doesn't shrink. It expands. And in this escalation, something sinister happens. Your threshold for boredom drops. You can no longer sit still, no longer endure silence, no longer face your own thoughts. Every moment demands stimulation. The ability to rest, to reflect, to simply be atrophies. Life becomes a frantic race between dopamine hits. And when the hits falter, despair surges in like a tide. The hollowing of relationships. What happens when pleasure becomes the axis of your existence? Relationships suffer. When you see others primarily as sources of pleasure, intimacy becomes transactional. The friend is someone who entertains you. The lover is someone who excites you. The colleague is someone who advances you. But when they no longer provide that spark, when they grow weary, difficult, imperfect, you cast them aside in search of someone better. Slowly, subtly, people become commodities. You stop loving them for who they are. You love them for how they made you feel. And so, true intimacy withers. Trust erodes. Loneliness spreads like a quiet plague. Is it any wonder that in a world overflowing with pleasures, loneliness has reached epidemic levels? You can be surrounded by bodies, drenched in stimulation, yet starved for connection. Because connection requires patience, sacrifice, and presence, things the pursuit of pleasure erodes. The quiet erosion of resilience. Another hidden cost, resilience. Pleasure makes life soft. When your baseline expectation becomes comfort, the smallest discomfort feels unbearable. Hunger, boredom, rejection, failure, things that once strengthened the human spirit now feel intolerable. We anesthetize ourselves at the slightest twinge of pain. But here's the irony. Resilience is built in struggle, not in ease. When you flee discomfort, you flee the very soil where growth occurs. The pursuit of endless comfort leaves you fragile, brittle, unprepared for the inevitable storms of existence. So when tragedy strikes, and it always does, you shatter. You lack the muscle of endurance because you spent your life avoiding pain. The cultural rot. The consequences extend far beyond individuals. Entire societies bend under the weight of this pursuit. Economies inflate bubbles of consumption, exploiting desires they helped manufacture. Natural resources are gutted to feed endless appetites. The planet itself groans under the weight of human craving. Forests burned, oceans choked, skies poisoned, all for pleasures that evaporate within days. And while the earth suffers, so does the human spirit. Cultures that worship pleasure over meaning grow shallow, cynical, and restless. Politics devolves into spectacle. Education shifts from wisdom to utility. Art becomes more about provocation than transcendence. Everything is filtered through the question, does it excite me now? The result? A civilization brilliant in technology, dazzling in distraction, but starving in depth. The death of the present. Perhaps the most devastating consequence of all, the loss of the present moment. Pleasure, by its nature, points forward. It whispers, just a little more, just around the corner. You live not here, but in the fantasy of what's next. Even when you hold the thing you desired, you are already leaning toward the next horizon. The ice cream melts in your mouth, and you're already thinking of tomorrow's flavor. You embrace your lover, and already wonder when the passion will fade. You receive the promotion, and already imagine the next rung. Life slips by in this way, not lived, but pursued. And when the end approaches, when you finally glance back, you realize you never truly inhabited your days. You are always chasing, never arriving. The trap tightens. This is the unseen consequence, not just misery, but entrapment. You are not free to stop, because stopping means facing the emptiness you've been running from. You are not free to rest, because rest feels like deprivation. You are not free to love deeply, because love requires more than pleasure. And so the leash tightens. You chase faster, hoping the acceleration itself will deliver freedom. But it only exhausts you more. The terrifying realization begins to form. Perhaps the real prison is not outside you at all, but inside the very structure of desire itself. The question becomes inescapable. If this is the cost, is there another way? Is there a rebellion against this cycle? A way to live not enslaved by pleasure, but free from it? To answer that, we must turn not to more indulgence, but to a radical break, to a rebellion of perspective, one that overturns everything you've been taught to believe. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, the leash of desire still tight around your neck. You've seen how it pulls you toward indulgence, toward comparison, toward exhaustion. And yet, what if, in this very moment, you reached up and unclipped it? Not by chasing a greater pleasure, but by refusing the game altogether? That thought terrifies you. Because if not pleasure, then what? If not the next thrill, then what sustains you? It feels like stepping off a cliff, like surrendering oxygen. But maybe that is what true rebellion requires. A leap into the unknown, the courage of refusal. History tells us that some of the freest souls were not those who owned everything, but those who renounced everything. The Stoics trained themselves to embrace discomfort, to strip away excess, to find joy not in possession, but in resilience. Seneca reminded himself daily that fortune could snatch away wealth, health, even life, and so he rehearsed poverty in advance, dining on coarse bread, sleeping on the ground, whispering, "Is this what I fear?" To modern ears, this sounds insane. Why rehearse suffering when comfort is available? Because they understood the truth. Freedom is not in having, but in not needing. Each indulgence you can release loosens the leash. Each craving you refuse weakens its grip. To rebel against pleasure is not to reject joy, it is to reject enslavement. A radical shift in perspective. Here is the counterintuitive truth. What you seek is not actually pleasure, but meaning. Pleasure fades, but meaning endures. Pleasure excites, but meaning sustains. Pleasure enslaves, but meaning liberates. The rebellion begins when you invert the question. Instead of asking, "What will give me the most enjoyment?" you ask, "What will give my life the deepest significance?" Instead of chasing the next high, you learn to embrace the low valleys as fertile soil for growth. Nietzsche called this amor fati, the love of one's fate. To not merely endure suffering, but to embrace it as necessary, even beautiful. To see pain not as the enemy, but as the sculptor of the soul. Examples of those who broke free. Consider Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in Auschwitz, stripped of everything: possessions, freedom, even family. Pleasure was absent, survival uncertain. Yet Frankl discovered a freedom the guards could not take, the freedom to choose his attitude. In that crucible of suffering, he found meaning. Later, he would write, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Or think of the ascetics and mystics across cultures, Buddhist monks, Christian hermits, Sufi poets. They gave up the pursuit of worldly pleasures not out of despair, but out of discovery. In the silence beyond indulgence, they found a joy untouchable by circumstance. And then there are quieter rebels artists who chose truth over applause, lovers who chose loyalty over passion, activists who chose sacrifice over comfort. Their lives were not easy, but they were radiant. They remind us there is a freedom deeper than pleasure, and it comes from serving something greater than the self. The tools of liberation. But how do you, in the modern world of endless cravings, begin this rebellion? It starts with small acts of refusal, discipline over impulse. When the craving arises, whether for sugar, for distraction, for validation, pause. Watch it without obeying. Notice that the urge is not fatal. It passes like a wave. Each time you resist, you grow stronger. Voluntary discomfort. Reclaim resilience by stepping into discomfort on purpose. Take a cold shower. Fast for a day. Walk instead of driving. These are not punishments, but trainings proof that you can endure, that pleasure is not your master. Silence and stillness. Strip away stimulation. Sit without your phone, without music, without escape. At first, the emptiness will roar. Then, slowly, you will see it soften. Beneath it lies not despair, but clarity, reorienting values. Ask yourself, relentlessly, does this action feed meaning or just pleasure? Choose the one that deepens you, even if it stings. These acts are not glamorous. They do not deliver the rush of indulgence, but they forge something far rarer, inner freedom, the power of creation over consumption. Another path of rebellion lies in creation. Pleasure makes you a consumer. Meaning makes you a creator. Instead of asking what you can take, you ask what you can give. Instead of measuring life by what you have, you measure it by what you've built, nurtured, transformed. Artists know this paradox well. Creating can be grueling, painful, even humiliating. Yet it brings a satisfaction deeper than any indulgence. Parents know it. Raising a child is relentless, exhausting, often thankless. Yet it resonates with purpose that no fleeting thrill can match. To rebel against pleasure is to shift from seeking sensation to seeking significance. Consumption drains you. Creation roots you, the fire that cannot be stolen. Imagine now a different kind of freedom. A freedom where the party can end, the money can vanish, the body can age, and yet you remain unbroken. Because your joy does not depend on what you consume, but on what you are. This is the fire that cannot be stolen. The flame that flickers not in indulgence, but in meaning. When you discover this, you begin to look at pleasure differently. You no longer cling to it as salvation. You enjoy it when it comes, but you do not kneel before it. You let it pass, knowing it was never the foundation of your existence. The rebellion's cost. Make no mistake, this rebellion has a cost. You will stand apart from the crowd. In a world addicted to pleasure, your refusal will look strange, even foolish. Others will mock your simplicity, your discipline, your refusal to chase what they worship. But their mockery is proof of your freedom. Because while they remain chained to the endless chase, you will walk lighter, freer, more whole. And so the rebellion unfolds, not with violence, but with refusal. Not with indulgence, but with meaning. Not with conquest, but with surrender to something deeper. But there remains a final step, a truth so profound it shifts the very ground of reality. For beyond rebellion lies revelation, not merely how to escape the trap, but why the trap exists at all, and what it reveals about the deepest structure of existence. Imagine after years of chasing, after countless indulgences and rebellions, you arrive at a strange moment of clarity. You are sitting alone, no music, no distractions, no feast, no lover, and instead of the familiar ache, you feel something different. Stillness. Not excitement, not ecstasy, but a quiet presence that doesn't ask for more. It is in this silence that the final realization dawns. The very pursuit of pleasure was never about pleasure at all. It was about your refusal to face life as it is raw, fleeting, imperfect, impermanent. Pleasure was not the goal, but the disguise. What you truly longed for was not stimulation, but wholeness. Not intoxication, but union. The false god of pleasure. The tragedy of human existence is not that pleasure is evil, but that we mistook it for a god. We made it the highest aim, the reason to live, the metric of success. Yet in worshiping it, we turned away from the deeper reality that life was never meant to be permanent bliss. The universe does not sustain eternal highs. Mountains are followed by valleys, day by night, breath by exhale. To cling to one half of the cycle is to resist life itself. No wonder you felt miserable. The very structure of existence was fighting your demand for constancy. Pleasure is a wave. Suffering is its undertow. To demand one without the other is to demand the impossible. The deeper current, presence. The final truth is this: what you were searching for was never more pleasure, but more presence. When you were truly present, immersed in music, in love, in creation, you mistook the joy of presence for the joy of pleasure. But presence is different. It does not fade when the thrill fades. It is not dependent on stimulation. It is the ground beneath all experience. To live in presence is to allow life to be exactly what it is: joyful or painful, full or empty, without clinging, without fleeing. It is to sit in the silence after the concert, not panicking, but listening. To embrace your lover not for the ecstasy, but for the ordinary warmth. To work not for the applause, but for the act itself. Presence is not a peak, it is a foundation. It is the ultimate rebellion, because it needs nothing to complete it. The mirror of mortality. Here's the haunting, liberating truth. All pleasures fade because you will fade. Your body will age. Your possessions will rot. Your triumphs will be forgotten. Death stands at the horizon of every joy. And instead of facing it, you chase distractions, hoping to drown out the sound of its footsteps. But what if death was never the enemy? What if it was the mirror that gave life its shape? Imagine if everything lasted forever. Every kiss, every song, every summer. Would they mean anything? Or would eternity drain them of their sweetness? It is mortality that sharpens meaning. The flower is beautiful because it wilts. The song is moving because it ends. The embrace is precious because you cannot hold it forever. The ultimate truth, then, is not to cling to pleasure, but to embrace impermanence itself. To see that life's fragility is not a curse, but its greatest gift, the freedom beyond pleasure. Once you understand this, the leash falls away. You are no longer enslaved by the cycle of craving and collapse. You can enjoy pleasure without worshiping it, endure pain without fleeing it. Both are waves on the surface of a deeper ocean, and you are not the wave, but the water. This is what mystics, philosophers, and sages have always pointed toward. The Buddhists called it nirvana, the extinguishing of craving. The Stoics called it tranquility, freedom from passion's tyranny. Even Nietzsche, with his defiance, urged us to affirm life in its totality, not just the highs, but the lows, the struggles, the darkness. The freedom beyond pleasure is not dullness. It is not a gray resignation. It is aliveness, unshackled from the demand that life always feel good. It is the capacity to say yes to existence as it is, a paradigm shift. Think about what this means for your life. Every pursuit that enslaved you, the wealth, the fame, the lust, the endless stimulation, no longer has the same power. You can enjoy them when they come, release them when they go. You are no longer a consumer of life, but a participant in it. And in this shift, something radical happens. Suffering itself transforms. It no longer feels like failure, but like depth. It becomes part of the tapestry of meaning, not its enemy. You can grieve without despair, endure without resentment, struggle without collapse. Because you no longer demand that life be only sweet. You allow it to be whole. The final image. Picture yourself walking through a forest at dusk. The air is cool, the sky painted in fading colors. You feel the ache of impermanence. This moment will not last. Yet instead of reaching for a camera, a distraction, or a future plan, you simply stand there, breathing. You let the beauty pierce you precisely because it will end. This is the ultimate truth. Pleasure was never the point. Presence was. Meaning was. The sacredness of existence, fleeting and fragile, was. And once you see this, the world does not become easier, but it becomes real. You are no longer haunted by the illusion of endless pleasure. You are freed to live not as a slave to desire, but as a witness to the miracle of being. So the haunting question that began this journey finds its answer, not in ecstasy, but in clarity. The pursuit of pleasure makes you miserable because it was never what you were truly seeking. What you sought all along was the fullness of life, itself pleasure, pain, and everything in between. And now, finally, you can stop running.